guys. These are the gold bugs and the survivalists, and they're all behind Ron Paul. And they email us, which I'm trying to generate a little email right now.
Apparently, one of the things that people are watching on YouTube is a CNBC segment where a reporter, I don't know, doesn't say who, are analyzing Bernanke's November testimony to Congress. That's one of the things they're also watching, and they reference Paul. Do we know who that is?
No, but the internet is a
we're in good company now.
Yeah, I guess you could say.
So Bernanke's getting it from both sides too. This is these two. You know, have you seen interest rates go up as the dollar has weakened? I mean, I haven't seen it. What does he want the 10-year at? Does he want it at 1%? And
what's the gold standard?
But he's appealing. That's demagoguery too, appealing to the basest instincts of people. You're stealing. You're taking 10% from these people. I mean, that's took some money from the people in the stock market yesterday too.
Okay, so in this final clip, we saw Joe concluding with his primary concern. Okay, the stock market lost value, and just before that, pretty much a complete disregard of the fact that a lot of people are losing a lot of money to inflation. Earlier in this clip, he said something that he was trying to attribute to Ron Paul, something like, what does he want? Interest rates at 1%? This shows me he has no conception of what Ron Paul is about. I mean, just earlier he said he wanted the Fed to raise interest rates. So, which is it, Joe? Does he want it at 1%? Does he want him to raise interest rates? I mean, figure it out in your own mind before you start talking to us. All right, now let's take a closer look at the context in which Dr. Paul's remarks were presented.
Congressman Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The best way I could describe the problems that we face here in this country, as well as the problem that the Federal Reserve faces, is that we're indeed between the rock and the hard place, because we have a serious problem. We don't talk about much how we got here. We talk about how we're going to patch it up. The bubble has been burst. We saw what happened after the NASDAQ bubble burst. We don't ask how it was created, and then we have a housing bubble, and it's deflating and it's spreading. And yet nobody says, where does it come from? And what is the advice that you generally get? And that is, inflate the currency. They don't say inflate the currency. They don't say debase the currency. They don't say devalue the currency. They don't say cheat the people who are saved. They say lower the interest rates. But they never ask you, and I don't hear you say too often, the only way I can lower interest rates is I have to create more money. I have money. So my question boils down to this. How in the world can we expect to solve the problems of inflation, that is, the increase in the supply of money, with more inflation?
Okay, there's a little more interaction between Congressman Paul and Ben Bernanke. You can see it elsewhere on the net. I encourage you to do so. And then Congressman Paul concludes with the remarks that we saw earlier. Now what we're going to see is we're going to see some real-time feedback from CNBC, from key players there. One, Rick Santelli, another, Steve Leisman. It should be edifying as to how these non-orchestrated remarks play.
We have some instant analysis right now from our CNBC Task Force panel. Steve Leisman is with us, as is Rick Santelli, Business Week's Robin Farzad, and in Miami, CNBC contributor Brian Westbury, Chief Economist with First Trust Advisors. Rick Santelli, I'll go to you first because I understand they are fired up in the pits about Mr. Bernanke's testimony. Tell us.
I'll tell you what, Sue. A lot of people, and I don't mean this to be political, but when Ron Paul was firing every revolver in Ben Bernanke's direction, there was a lot of people cheering down here with regard to the only tool the Fed ever seems to use, are the easing tool. And on the inflation front, many traders were reading the subtitles, and they went back and checked. He made statements like, import price, with respect to the weaker dollar, it affects import prices but not domestic prices. That's kind of an inconsistency. His performance was far from a command performance, and I'm being kind.
He didn't look like he felt very good either, Steve Leisman. But what did you hear the chairman talking about today?
Not what Rick heard, I think.
That's interesting. How so?
I mean, Ron Paul's economics really leave a lot to be desired. He talks about people having their savings wiped out because the dollar devalued. And I think Ben Bernanke, the Fed chairman, correctly points out that it is devalued if you're spending all your money abroad, that it's domestic prices that matter. I also think that Rick is wrong. I think Ben Bernanke's been very consistent about the impact of the weaker dollar on the U.S. economy. There's a portion of it where prices increase because of imports. Also, export prices can adjust to reflect those higher import prices and be higher. There are impacts throughout the economy, but they're not decisive for the U.S. economy on inflation.
Hey, Steve,
they're just one piece of it, Rick. Yeah.
Did you see the 2s to 30s?
I did not, Rick. I was listening to Bernanke.
Oh, my God. In 2 days, it's gone from 80 to 120. I mean, it really is amazing how the market is just, the yield curve is going crazy in the 2-year notes. I mean, we're under 3.5%.
Meaning what, Rick? Meaning
what point should we take from that?
Let's put this in perspective. What does it mean to increase the spread there like that? What are you talking about?
Well, I think that half the people that are playing the yield curve think the economy is going to find more and more effects of what's going on in the credit markets spilling into other areas, credit spreads, potentially stocks think Cisco, and the other half think that inflation on the headline level before the end of the year is going to get nasty.
Okay, so here we have a real-time reaction from some of the guys at CNBC. In particular, Rick Santelli started off talking about the bond guys down there in the pit cheering the remarks by Congressman Ron Paul. And really what that was all about was had to do with the response that we didn't include here. But basically Ben Bernanke said that, well, so what if the dollar falls? If you're buying things in the U.S. economy, everything's relative. That's kind of his position. But frankly, the bond traders recognized that for being the kind of silly statement that it was. I mean, as just one of many examples, consider the price of oil. I don't think we've been seeing that go down with our purchasing power and the value of our U.S. dollar. And so really that was what that was all about. And then, of course, Steve Leisman, he's not in the bond side. He's the some economist title there with CNBC. And you can see, again, him trying to scramble to apologize, for the fiat monetary system. I mean, that seems to be his job. I see it quite often from him. I encourage you to watch his remarks again, because Rick Santelli is shooting from the heart. That's pretty obvious. Whereas Steve is stumbling with double talk, and all he can do is talk about Ron Paul's economics. Well, frankly, Steve could stand a good deal of training from Congressman Paul on economics, and that's where that begins and it ends. So that's sort of a summation of that clip. In summing overall, hey, this is my perspective. I might have been a bit harsh here and there. I don't know these people, but I do know honor and integrity when I see that, and I see that in Congressman Paul.